Alrighty, this video is going to be about catching mangrove snappers inshore. Now, not just any mangrove snappers, but the eating size mangroves in the 14 to 16 inch range, and to try to bypass all the little juveniles that tend to be bait stealers and kind of fun to catch, but can be kind of annoying at times since they're so prolific. And the way we're going to do that is by using pinfish, actually live pinfish. Specifically about silver dollar sized, and we're going to use those as a live bait, and as well as if occasionally they might not like the live bait, but you can flay those and use them as a strip baits as well. But what I'm going to show you is we're going to go today is, because the wind, we're going to go back into the backcountry, and that is to the north of the Keys. And if you ever look out from US 1, you'll see a row of little islands going parallel with US 1 on the north side, and that is towards the Gulf, and that's considered the backcountry. Today I'm going to launch out of Big Kayak Key, and if you take a look at one of my prior videos, you'll see where the launch is. It's on the end of Barcelona Road, and it's actually right in this spot here. And you take the channel and then head straight out. And what we're going to go to is a couple of my, I call my grocery store spots, where I go when I want to pick up a couple of nice sandwich size snappers fairly easily and consistently. And there's a couple spots, and this will also help you identify good spots by just doing some internet searching. This one is Fish Hawk Key. Not too far out. I think it's about around 2 miles from the launch, so it's not horribly far. And way you can probably kind of see is, if you look at this island out in the middle and you see these kind of light blue and then the brownish, those are basically flats. They go from being pretty much almost exposed to a couple inches at low tide to maybe a foot, 2 foot at most during high tide. But then you come over here and then you see these dark patches, or cuts, I like to always keep calling them. And if you zoom in there, you can kind of see that there goes flats, then the drop offs, and then these are all dark areas, and then you have definitely the more deeper where the sand is, where it's wedged cuts out of them. And these islands here are pretty much almost all the way encased with the deeper water. And that's what the mangroves tend to hang out at. They can go on the flats and feed, of course, just like all the other fish, but if you're going to be hanging out in all these sections which are just flats, and then you find these deep pools, especially during summer times, but pretty much almost any time, that's where you're going to find them hanging out, and that's the areas I target. So one of the first parts in the video is I stop at this place here. I didn't fish it because it does get hit. Not a lot, but it does get hit enough where there's big ones in here, but usually what happens is I could pull 1 or 2 out at each one of these little islands in the cuts, and then they get smartened up and it shuts the bite off, so it's that quick there. So you got to be kind of stealthy. And the other one coming up here, and just hitting farther up, is this Kunky. And if you can back out, you can kind of see it's right in the middle of Jewfish Basin. So this is that major current flow from the Gulf that heads out to the Atlantic. And if you take another closer look at this island, it also is encased by flats, except for this one section here with the cuts. Okay, and that is the spot that I'm going to key in on. And the way it basically works is, after I head out there, I go over to just the edge here where it starts doing a little color change. These brown areas tend to be the dead grass flats, and then the little lighter areas here are more of the green live grass, and I tend to like those, and anywhere that has any white sand patches, and that's where I go to pick up the pinfish. But the third area that you'll see me catching stuff in is actually working these channels, and I am actually specifically fishing right about here in the video. This is a major channel. When the tides change, it'll either flow this direction through or vice versa. And then I just sitting in tight right along the mangrove edges, because all these have a lot of current flow through them, so there's not a lot of structure to break it up, so they won't sit in the center. They'll always be along these undercuts and the edges. But that's the plan right there. Watch the video and you can kind of see how to do it. Thanks. This is the launch on Big Coppet Key, Gulf side. It's on the end of Barcelona Drive. The facility name is Gulf View Park Public Boat Ramp, or also known as Barcelona. The first stop is Fish Hawk Key. This provides a good example of the transitionings going from flats and then into these channels and then the undercuts and the mangroves, and basically how distinct they are once you see them. These are the areas that you really want to target when you're basically any type of mangrove snappers, snook, especially if you're up farther north. Any of those kind of species, the grouper will hide underneath, and they stay within the roots of the mangroves. As well as during the heat of the summer, the water tends to be a little bit cooler, as well as those areas are cut out because of current, and anytime there's current you'll find the fish, because that's where the bait will be. But keep an eye out as those transitions, as I go over the flats, through the cuts, come up over the flats, and you can see how the depth varies quite a bit. The second stop is Kunky. This is the island in the center of the Jewfish Basin. And once again, I just cruise through it because I like to just take a quick look, see if there's a lot of activity. Generally, you'll see a lot of the small snappers around. If you see those, they tend to be a good indication that there'll be some big ones there, but they tend to be a lot more elusive. So, but once you see activity, there's more likely going to be larger ones there as well. Another good thing about these little islands amongst the flats is that the majority of the boats can't access them, especially some of these that are in the real skinny flats where there are no channels leading to them. None of the bay boats or bigger boats can even get to them. Occasionally some of the flats boats will be able to go there, but even then those guys tend to be running and gunning, wanting to get into certain locations, so they even overlook these spots. So they tend to have quite a lot less pressure. This one in particular, because it's about 3.5 miles from the launch, so it doesn't see much of the kayakers, small little dinghy boats coming out and visiting it, and it's just an oasis in that whole center of that basin there that it constantly replenishes with fish there. So that's another reason why I'm not too concerned about giving up these spots. As you can see, it's packed full of little juvenile snappers, so that's a good indication that this is a well-placed hole. There's really no way that you can really throw in a shrimp or cut bait, because they would instantly get devoured by all these little guys. So that's kind of the reason why I want to target with the larger pinfish, so none of these small ones will even mess with it. For the pinfish, I use a simple fish finder rig with a small egg sinker and a little bluegill hook, and tip it with a little piece of squid. Throw it out, or basically you can just any little spot and either let it sit there for a second and then slowly drag it to you. If there's any in that vicinity, they'll come and get it. At the moment I was using the chum bag out, so there was quite a few of them in the immediate vicinity. If I didn't have the chum bag, I would basically cast a little bit farther out and then slowly drag it back. They bite very quickly, so you just have to do a quick set of the hook and you're good to go. I was targeting little silver dollar size ones for the live, and then if I caught any bigger ones, I would use those for cut bait. Once you're all set up, the key couple things to know is, one is that you want to be anchored. The reason being is that, for one, when you're fishing a live bait, it takes them a little while before a bite will occur. So if you're floating around, and especially with the knocker rig, you'll be dragging the bait and it makes it look unnatural. Two is, when you get these larger fish, they will easily pull the kayak towards them. And what that'll do, as soon as you get hooked up, they're going to head for the mangroves, and then it's going to tow the boat towards the mangroves. They're going to get into the mangroves and get all tangled up, and you're not going to be able to fight, because the more you pull, it's just the faster it pulls you into the mangroves. So it's very important to either use an anchor, or what like I'm doing is I've got my stakeout pole. Here I'm heading to the third spot in the channels of the Mudflat Keys. If you take a look, pan around, basically it's coming up to low tide. It's not quite yet there, but as you can see, all the brown horizon there, those are all the flats that are usually under a foot or two of water, but now they're almost exposed to the point they will be exposed in a short while longer, and it really makes the channels apparent. Very beautiful area. I always recommend people go there, almost more so than going out to the reef. Here I'm anchored up in the channels off to the one side. Very important to remember that although you have a wide channel to work with, hardly anything except probably maybe some sharks or rays and stuff, jacks cruising through the center. Most of like the grouper, snapper, snook, that kind of thing will be tucked in amongst the roots of the mangroves and any eddy waters. These channels push a lot of water flow, so it's really cranking moving. So they do that to avoid the exhaustion. Another tip is, when you're casting, don't necessarily pitch it right underneath to the mangroves. My other videos with the artificials, I do that because you want to pull them out and get them attracted, and so you have to get the bait in there. With the live bait, the activity will get them from underneath out to the bait, and you need a little bit of a buffer zone to be able to let them take the bait, get it down into their mouth to where the hook is, and then be able to set the hook and pull them out before they get back under. Generally what they do is they'll grab their food and then head right back to the safety there. So you have to have that balance. You can't jerk too fast because it'll just pull the bait out and they won't get hooked. But you don't want them to take it all the way in and get intertwined. I headed back to the second spot because it was coming on evening time, and the incoming tide was filling up the basin, so the water levels were increasing, and it pushes a ton of water through there, so there was a heavy current being pushed through there. And this really builds up the activity. So I went back to the second spot. If you see me using the spinning reel, I'm using cut bait, the cut pinfish strips, and my bait caster setup, I was using it for the live bait, so you can tell which bait I'm using per which rod. When you're playing with these larger mangroves, you can't muck around, so I'm using a 20-pound braid with a 30-pound fluorocarbon leader, and once I set that hook, I'm basically doing the old school bass fishing and just yanking them away from the cover. You don't want to play with them in the initial part because you want to pull them out away from the mangroves, Once you got them out, then you can kind of settle down a bit. But if you watch, I am thumb on the spools and I'm not giving any drag or at all, because the little bit of a flex that the anchor pole gives, plus the turning of the kayak, even just a few inches is enough for them to get wrapped up in those mangroves. So you got to set that hook and then just yank them out and either bring them right back to the boat, or once you got them away, you could play with them. One thing to remember on the Gulf side waters, that when you're using any type of live or dead bait, that you must use a circle hook. When you're using artificials, it doesn't matter, but any type of live or dead bait, you must use a circle hook. Okay, guys, that wraps it up. If you got any questions, just let me know. Have a good one. Thanks.